I was in the lead, Bradley, and we were coming around a corner towards, some people would know this, Screaming Lady was kind of a big statue, a very known area at that time. And when we were coming around the corner, lead Bradley got around, and second Bradley got hit by a deep buried IED.
Welcome to Combat Story. I'm Ryan Fugit, and I served Warzone tours as an Army attack helicopter pilot and CIA officer over a 15-year career. I'm fascinated by the experiences of the elite in combat. On this show, I interview some of the best to understand what combat felt like on their front lines. This is Combat Story. Today we hear a combat story from both a veteran Cav soldier and active duty Green Beret, Kenny Stone and Ben Raymond. Kenny and Ben did not serve together, but have found community, purpose, and challenge as part of Kenny's nonprofit, Soldiers on Singletrack, which brings veterans and active duty soldiers together through mountain biking and racing. Kenny served as a Cav soldier with 1-5 Cav in Iraq across 2 tough deployments during the surge, where during an IED event, he ended up with TBI. He found a rekindled love for mountain biking and realized it helped address some of the cognitive issues he'd experienced after leaving the service and wanted other vets to experience the same. Ben met Kenny at a Soldiers on Singletrack event where they struck up a friendship. Ben is still in service with 3rd Special Forces Group and started his SF career as an 18 Delta medic, but then transitioned to the 18 Charlie route. He found mountain biking to be the hobby he needed to disconnect and clear his head when he's out of uniform. I hope you enjoy this story about finding a new path after service to help deal with the challenges faced after years of a traumatic and trying job like those in the military, law enforcement, and first responder communities. And please check out Soldiers on Singletrack if this is something that you feel could help you or someone you know. Kenny and Ben, thanks so much for taking the time to share your stories with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having us on here. I really appreciate it.
So one of the reasons we connected was really on this program, Kenny, that you helped set up after getting out of service, Soldiers on Singletrack. And I'm going to ask you to speak a little bit more to that. But I think one of the reasons we wanted to talk specifically is so many vets find it difficult to make the transition, myself included. And I know you'd shared that with me, Kenny. And it seems like you found something that gave you what you needed after getting out of the military. It just took a while. So before we get into all these stories, could you share what S.O.S is for people?
Yeah, Soldiers on Singletrack. We are a 501c3 nationwide veteran-ran organization to get veterans out on mountain bikes for adjunct therapy, either while in service or post-service. Our main goal is to recreate 3 main things that we all experience while we're in, is community, purpose, and challenge. While we're all in, we all experience that tight-knit community that we all have, whatever type of unit you're in, whether it be special units, even down to big Army. Everyone has their tight-knit community. And once we leave, we kind of lose that piece. So it's to help recreate that feeling of community that we all feel we lost. On top of that, we're helping veterans and active duty find another purpose and another challenge in their own personal lives. Mountain biking specifically helps provide a mass amount of challenge, from being a beginner all the way up to being a pro. Like, you are constantly being challenged on the bike, any type of discipline, like enduro, downhill, gravel riding, road riding, and venture riding, you name it, it's a challenge of some sort. And it gives that individual a purpose again, to feel like, I need to be doing this. This is my task. This is my purpose. I need to be a part of this again. So we kind of cultivate all 3 of those things together to help provide a better transition. And even while you're in, providing that type of resource for veterans.
Excellent. And you've been out for some time, Kenny. Now, Ben, over to you on this one, because you're still in, but a part of this program.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm coming up on, almost 14 years in. So I got a few years left, and I'm a little nervous for that whole transition phase that's coming down the road a little bit, for sure. But for me, it's slightly different. Mountain biking was the more or less like the stress relief I needed. It was I was getting to a point where I was getting real burnt out. Our op tempo was just go, 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 whether it was deploying or just training up to deploy. And I needed something else. And it was my wife. She called me out on it, and she was like, "Hey, you gotta do something." And my bikes, I grew up mountain biking. They got stolen back in like 2007, I want to think. And I said, well, I always like doing this. I might as well try it again. And I bought a bike and started riding and started buying more bikes. And next thing I know, I meet this group of people. I hear about this organization. And then Kenny's tricking me into riding gravel bikes out in Idaho last week or 2 weeks ago. And it's what I've needed to just kind of get my brain back and get my focus back. And it's a great thing. And I think it's going to help me up through transition and hopefully beyond.
Yeah, I'm sure your day-to-day job isn't crazy enough. You got to get gravel riding on weekends in as well. Oh, geez.
Yeah, definitely.
So you both have fairly interesting, I would say, although very different childhoods that we'll dive into here in just a second. But as we talk about them, I'm curious where biking comes in for both of you in those childhoods. So Kenny, why don't we go to you first, if you can kind of share how you were brought up and if biking was around at all at that point.
Yeah, so I kind of grew up in what you would call a broken home. My parents were never married. I grew up for a little while with my mom. She was a single mom. I have two younger sisters. And in the midst of that, there were some things that happened in my childhood, and we kind of moved from my mom to my grandma's house. I lived there. And meantime, this whole time period, I didn't actually know my dad yet. And when I was living with my grandparents, that's actually when I met my dad, and kind of went through like that transition phase of meeting, hanging out, and then eventually moving in with him. My sisters and I have different fathers. So I moved in with my dad and my sister stayed with my grandparents. And then moving around with my dad to different houses and whatnot until we kind of settled down. But bikes in general, bicycles, like I was a kid, I'd get a Schwinn and go pedal around and find other kids around town. So it wasn't really bicycles at first. It was actually motocross that was my first love. And that's what my dad and I did on the weekends. So every weekend I looked forward to getting out on the track and racing all the way up into middle school. And I had a class 3 separation and in my shoulder. And so my dad ended up selling my bike because I was going to be out for almost a full year. And then that was kind of the transition from motocross to mountain bikes. He told me if I wanted to get back into sport, I was old enough to save up and buy a new bike. I got bored of saving for a dirt bike. So I ended up actually buying a mountain bike because my friends in school were doing that. And so that's how I actually started in a mountain bike in middle school, high school era. In the meantime, I was actually left my dad's and was moving in with my aunt. So yet again, moving from another set of parents to something stable. And then I actually lived with my aunt until I graduated high school. And that's when I ended up joining the military.
Got it. All right. And then how about you, Ben? You have your own kind of interesting story here too.
Yeah. So I grew up, I don't remember the exact age. I'm sure my mom would remember whenever they put me on a bike and got the training wheels off and all that stuff. But I grew up riding a bike. I always loved just riding around the driveway in the neighborhood. And I got big into BMX biking early on in middle school. And I did that for a while. I used to every summer I'd look forward to, I had this deal with my mom. I got a job washing dishes. And if I saved up enough money for 1 week, she would match me for the second week to go to Camp Woodward in Pennsylvania for like BMX camp. So the skaters and the rollerbladers and everyone else down there. And that's what I did every summer. My dad was in the Air Force, so he would look for an instructor job in Pennsylvania for the time I had to go. We'd drive down there. I'd go to camp for 2 weeks. And then eventually I ended up getting a job in a ski shop. And in the summertime, we sold mountain bikes. And that's when I started making that transition. My BMX friends made fun of me, but I was like, that's kind of fun. It's got this shock on the front. It bounces. And that kind of led me to where I was. My bikes, when I was living in Colorado, I think you're referring to what I wrote about in my thing. I was kind of weird growing up. I was a hippie kid and I wore Birkenstocks and there was a weird summer of dreadlocks. That was a weird thing. The constant was usually I was always on some form of a bike until they got stolen and I was too poor to replace them. But that's kind of how I just always loved it. And it was a big part of my childhood. Me and my friends would still talk about it. Some of them were skaters, some of them were riders, but we always had a good time. And, it was a way to get around town and get into trouble.
What's the typical kind of personality of a mountain biker? as you're talking about like these different groups of folks, I could see it, skaters and whatnot. Like, what's a mountain biker kind of personality?
Well, I think, Kenny, I think you might agree. It might depend on the specialty.
I would agree. It definitely depends on the type of bike that you ride. And it's true. Like, it's not stereotypical. Like, if you ride, like, for instance, you said skaters and bikers, like, those are two varying degrees. Mountain biking has its own type of group of people. And then you have gravel riders, that they're their own type of group. And then you have road riders, they're their own type of group. And like, everyone melds well together, but varying degrees of personalities in whatever type of riding you do.
Is S.O.S all of those, or is it just the mountain biking?
S.O.S is everything. If it's on a bike, like, it's well accepted. I primarily focus on the downhill enduro side of things, but I am branching out. Like Ben said, I tricked him into a gravel race 2 weeks ago, and that was both our first experience doing that. And I'm pretty sure both of us had like minimal training going into it. So it worked out. So, I mean, we're definitely open to any form of riding for S.O.S.
Real quick, though, when we talk about this gravel race, I only went there for 1 day of racing. Kenny was there for 4. he went for like the big show. I showed up for the 1 day 54. The day I did like 54 or 56 miles, he did 104, I want to say.
What?
So I'm gonna put him on the spotlight there because that was pretty impressive.
That's awesome. Man. So Ben, how did you make the jump from hippie with dreadlocks to an army uniform, man? Or why?
It was kind of weird. I moved out to Colorado. I went to Colorado Mountain College in Steamboat Springs, and I was a ski and snowboard business major. It's a real thing. I promise. Didn't make it up. And I was out there, had a great group of friends. Class would get canceled because of a snow day. So you'd see your teachers online, like they'd wait till the last second to cancel class so they could beat you to the chairlift. And it was great, but to be honest with you, I was partying all the time. I worked in a pizza shop. I managed a Quiznos. But I was just, I was drinking beer, having a good time with the friends, going to school sometimes. And eventually I was like, this is getting rough. And I ended up, I moved back home to New Hampshire and became a firefighter. And that's where all of a sudden, okay, the beard had to come off, and then had to cut the hair because, it could light on fire, things like that. And I did that for almost 4 years. I actually did end up landing a full-time job, but it was 2008. The big departments where I wanted to work were laying off and weren't hiring. And I saw, I think it was on the FD&Y employment page, that they would treat me like a New York resident on their hiring list if I had military experience. So I said, okay, I'll do 4 years in the Army. I could go do 4 years, get out, and then these departments, I can, go outside of New Hampshire. And I was in Afghanistan in 2013. They offered a $2,000 enlistment bonus. And I was like, well, I've been in the Army for 3 years now. That sounds kind of cool. It's working out pretty good. And here I am almost 14 years later.
Did you talk to anybody at home, the family, anyone about going into the Army?
I did. I had my wife, we were dating at the time. We've been together for a while, and I was pretty sure we were going to get married. And hopefully she can't hear me right now. And so we discussed it, and I don't know, we made a pros and cons list. We joke about it every now and then. And I told my dad first, and he was all about it. He wanted me to join the Air Force, but the recruiter was never at work. And then I knew I didn't want to be a Marine, and it just kind of worked out. And I left, and family, all my friends supported me. They thought it was a little crazy, but it made sense to them. Eventually, they told me that, like, yeah, this makes sense.
All right. And Kenny, we'll jump to you in just a second, but did the pros and cons list that you made, Ben, like if you looked at it today, would it be accurate? Like, did you nail it, or did you completely miss stuff on that?
I think we missed on some things, especially if the healthcare and everything sounds great, but my wife gets pretty frustrated with military healthcare. Yeah, I'd say it works out. It's been a pretty stable, especially and where I work at, it's it's been a pretty stable life. I'm fortunate compared to a lot of people. I mean, I've been at Fort Liberty we've been here 9 years, I think. I think next month will be 9 years, and we probably will be here till the end. So I've been able to provide my family, my kids with a pretty stable life compared to most of the military. So yeah, I'd say it's worked out pretty good, and I think my wife's been happy with it 90% of the time, and so have I.
Yeah. It's funny when you hear a special forces person say that they got some stability because they've basically been at one base, but sure, you're on the road nonstop, man. Deployments.
Yeah,
and training,
definitely.
so.
I'm switched over to the instructor life now, so it's been weird. It's at the point now where we joke. My wife she'll get mad and say, "Are you deploying soon? Because we're tired of having you here." We laugh and have a good time.
I know that feeling. All right, Kenny, over to you then, man. Seriously, probably challenging upbringing. It sounds like moving around. Don't know what the role model figures were like, the way you described bouncing around and broken family. What was the decision for you to get in?
Honestly, like ever since I was a kid, I was fascinated with World War II and D-Day specifically. Like in middle school specifically, I like binged anything and everything that was that. I had this vision of becoming a ranger, and like that, like as a kid, like I knew that's what I was going to do. And then obviously September 11th happened when I was in middle school. I was obviously too young at that point, but it was still something that like shaped and molded my decision even more. Went through high school, and did the high school kid thing, did a lot of dumb stuff. And after high school, I had the opportunity to join immediately, but I wanted to try school just to see if I could even manage that. I never really enjoyed high school or school in general, but I was like, maybe college will be different. I enrolled, and I skipped about every single class. I think I went like 3 times total, and just knew like this isn't it. So I, in the middle of my term, enlisted and left. My aunt was the first person that I told, and she was kind of surprised, but also at the same time not, because she knew that in the back of her mind that that's something I've always wanted to do. Majority of my family supported my decision and kind of knew going in, like that's something I've always thought about and wanted to do. So I was pretty fortunate to have the support. And it wasn't a huge surprise for most people. But it made, honestly, my childhood life made everything in Big Army very easy for me. It was actually, for me, kind of a joke. Going through basic training and standards have obviously been dropping slowly as years progress. So I had this high expectation of it being really hard, and it was honestly kind of a cakewalk. And so when I hear a lot of people that struggle with that piece, me personally, I just don't understand it. And that's probably because of my upbringing. But I jived very well with how the military runs, and just being able to meld and be okay with things changing, and not having these expectations really. I mean, expectations, but they are going to change.
Did either of you have some crazy recruiter experience? It seems like the funny stories that come out in dealing with recruiters can just be off the wall. Did either of you have, I don't know, the rug pulled out from under you or anything surprising?
What about?
I had a pretty easy recruiter, honestly. My recruiter actually was on the wrestling team for Army, and that's kind of how we met. He came out to a wrestling practice when I was in high school, and then just kind of talked throughout high school off and on. And so for me, it was pretty easy. He was pretty straightforward about it. He was a finance clerk, and he didn't want to be. So he found a loophole and got on the wrestling team, and that's what he did for the Army. And then he got moved to recruiting. So I was pretty fortunate. He was pretty straightforward with me.
How about you, Ben?
My recruiter was he had some like audio visual job. I think he took it, not like combat camera. I think he filmed video or something. And, 2009 when I was at the recruiting station. He was the only one with slick sleeve. I didn't really know what that meant at the time. I just heard them making fun of him in the office every now and then. But like when it came time for me to go to basic training, I never went in the office much. Like he never needed to see me. I didn't have to do any activities. And when I walked in the day I was shipping down to Boston to fly out, they said, "Oh, you're one of I won't say his name. They called me one of his ghosts." And I was like, "Okay." I didn't really know what that meant. And I started looking through my packet as I was going down to Boston, go to the hotel for the night, and my signature was signed on a lot of things, but it wasn't my signature. He was just like filling in the blanks for me. So I was like going through real carefully that night, checking everything. Like, what did I get? And like, luckily it all worked out. I got what I signed up for. But yeah, I guess that's all I remember about that guy. He signed all my stuff for me, and that was that.
Oh my gosh. All right. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but Ben, you end up going engineers. Kenny, you end up going CAV. Did I get that
I was
right?
yeah, I worked for in an engineer unit. I was a 68 whiskey, the medic.
Okay. Medic from the start then. So got it. And then Kenny, for you?
I was infantry, but I got put in 1st Cav Division.
Okay. We've interviewed a couple CAV folks, and I was in the CAV from an aviation standpoint. So I understand the CAV, but when you talk about those 3 points that are important for S.O.S, kind of the community, the purpose and challenge, like when you think of camaraderie and that sort of thing, like the CAV, I feel has a lot of that. Could you explain to people what a CAV unit is like, the mentality of the CAV, maybe what a spur ride was like if you guys did that?
So my time at the Great Place for I don't even know if it's called Fort Hood anymore, to be honest.
What is it then now?
I'll Google it.
All right.
But my time there was kind of short-lived. Most of my time that I was there, actually, I was deployed. I was only in garrison for a year, and majority of that was train up for the next deployment. So I didn't really get to experience most of the like fun CAV things that you get to experience, I guess. But the camaraderie that I had, I was very fortunate in my, even breaking it down to my team all the way up, I will say to battalion. Past battalion, I don't know it. But we were very tight-knit, had things going, and very close and worked well as a team overall. And so I was very fortunate to have that, especially being thrown into a deployment and then obviously my follow-up deployment time too. So we were able to work well and jive, and there wasn't, I mean, there's obviously things that would go awry, as things do in every unit, but being able to manage those things and move forward and not have major hiccups was nice.
Did you feel like that was don't want to put words in your mouth here, but you described kind of the broken family situation growing up. Did you feel like you had found family when you got in, or did that come later with the?
Oh, entirely. Like now, I mean, I don't get to talk to a lot of my guys, like a lot of the guys that I served with very often, but they are very much my family. I was just in Colorado a month ago, and my team leader, squad leader, like we all went up, but I hadn't seen him in 10 years. Talked to him maybe twice, but it was like immediately right where we left off, like not skipping a beat. And it's just one of those things that you just can't experience unless you experience it. And it is very much a very tight knit family.
Yeah. Ben, so why did you go the medic route?
Well, actually we'll circle back to my recruiter. I looked on the internet and I was like, well, the Army has firefighters. So I told him, I said, I want to be a firefighter. And he said, no, that's not actually a real MOS. So we don't have firefighters. And I said, okay. I said, well, I guess I'll go the medic route, because that was another part of being a firefighter. You had to be an EMT and everything. I said, I can do that. And then I got to my first unit, and we had a whole platoon of firefighters. So my recruiter lied to me. I can say that for reals. But yeah, I was interested in medicine for a while, and I actually thought I was going to go like be a PA and do all that stuff eventually, and it's not my jam. I was over medicine. I do it when I have to, and if I need to. But I've switched to the engineer route now, and I'm much happier.
Got it. Do you regret that you didn't get the firefighter MOS, or do you feel like you found your way to what you should have been doing?
I think I found my way. I often wonder, like, what would have happened if I did get that firefighter MOS. when I ran into some firefighters while we were deployed and everything, and they said they just kind of hang out, play Xbox and whatnot, and they're always ready to respond. And then especially here in Garrison, I see them, they're leaving the fire trucks all the time, going over the wrecks and everything after PT. But I don't know. I'm still debating on getting back into it once I retire too. So I do miss it. I liked it. I grew up around the fire service, and I don't know. I hope to one day get back to it, but I'm pretty happy with what I've done so far.
That's awesome. I just watched, because 9/11 was so recently, the anniversary, and there was a phenomenal, I think it was a CBS documentary just about FDNY and what was going on that day. And they had film crews with one of the head firefighters in the city responding, and the amount of guys that ran into that building is just insane, man. So incredible.
We did a memorial wad for them the other day. I did with my students. We did 343, and I've watched a few documentaries on it. They did some amazing work that day. It was such a tragic day. It was sad to see them all perish.
Jeez. Just a quick word from our sponsor, and we'll get right back to this combat story. Today's podcast is sponsored by Nutrisense. That was the sound of the Nutrisense biosensor that I've been wearing. I tried a continuous glucose monitor last year, better understand my glucose levels and what foods tended to impact me. I gave up after 2 weeks because it felt like it was just me and the sensor, and it was not intuitive. Nutrisense comes with an app that provides the perfect amount of information on what I'm doing and why. There are very short tutorials that I've found extremely helpful to explain what glucose and insulin are for the first time I actually understand this, what impact they have on the body, and why that matters. This was exactly the type of insight I was looking for, and it is very neatly packaged. Now I'm focused on looking at the foods that tend to spike my glucose levels, find ways to better manage those. What I've found so far, within 2 days, is that my glucose levels are very sensitive to certain snack bars that I just grab and go, and now I know I need to change that. Fortunately, it doesn't happen with coffee, and doesn't have the same impact that I was worried it would have for beer. 2 staples in my diet. And I'll share more about my use of Nutrisense in upcoming episodes, just to give you an idea of what's been working for me in case it can help you. To start decoding your body's messages and pave the way for a healthier life, visit nutrisense.com/combat and get $30 off your first month and 1 month of board certified nutritionist support. When they ask how you learned about Nutrisense, make sure to tell them it was the Combat Story podcast. That's nutrisense.com/combat, $30 off your first month and 1 month of board-certified nutritionist support. And now, back to this combat story. Kenny, let me go to you. Can you get us to kind of the first time you find yourself outside the wire in a combat zone? The reason I ask is we've interviewed 140 people now, and sometimes it's very mundane first op, and sometimes it's crazy. What was yours like?
Unexpected, really. So like I said, I caught up. My unit was already deployed, so I caught up to them. They were already, and so I had to my OSUT, went to my unit for a month, and they trained me up on deployment, which didn't really set me up for success. Once I got to my unit, it was I met my team, and we were going out on mission that night. So it was I'm day one, I am fresh, wet behind the ears. I am fresh, and so I'm just kind of going through what, my training that I went through, and just kind of going through it. And we were a mechanized unit because I was in the cav. But most of our movements were outside of the Bradley. We use the Bradley as heavy machine guns as needed, but most of the time we were just running up and down blocks. And so, yeah, my first time out the wire, 30 minutes in, after running around, we're taking shots from down the street and we're chasing people down. And so it was very much my very first experience out the wire was, it's time to go. And that was still during the time that in the Amaria province, where it was still kind of a stronghold at that time point. So every night was an experience. It was not just one and done. So I learned very quick what our op tempo was and what we needed to do to get the mission done.
Now, I'll come to you in just a second, Ben. One of the things that I had read before this interview, Kenny, was a piece written by who I think was the battalion commander at the time, Cool, maybe Lieutenant Colonel Cool, talking about the experience in Amaria and what they had to do. And basically kind of went into country saying that they were going to do kind of like transition work over to the Iraqi security forces, and then very quickly realized because of the sectarian violence, like you had to protect the populace, which meant tons of patrols outside the vehicles, like you mentioned. Much bigger target, basically, like less protection. So could you kind of take us through one of the more challenging events from that deployment, just with that context in mind?
I could go into one instance in particular. It was kind of towards the end of our deployment time. Like you were saying, like we were still outside the vehicles. This instance in particular, we were towards the end of the night of our, and mind you, our patrol time was during the curfew hours. So we would roll out 30 minutes before curfew to show force. And that gave everyone basically the warning, like, if you're out, like, you're not supposed to be out, and it's not good news. And then we would roll back in basically 2 a.m. So, or no, I'm sorry, 6 a.m. So like curfew hours was every night where we were out. So that would kind of set the tone for what we were doing. We were towards the end of our patrol. So we were done with our AO that we were clearing and trying to gain intel on, and we were riding in the back of the Bradleys. I was in the lead Bradley, and we were coming around a corner towards, some people would know this, Screaming Lady was kind of a big statue and a very known area at that time. And when we were coming around the corner, lead Bradley got around, and second Bradley got hit by a deep buried IED. Which disabled our vehicle, the Bradley, immediately. And so we did our 5s, 25s, and just kind of like as quickly and as effectively as we could try to secure our area, make sure our guys weren't wounded. Our driver door was locked. The turret was locked. So our gunner and the Bradley commander had to jump up out of the turret and kind of like stumbled, fall out. The driver's hatch door was locked. We couldn't kick it open. The drop door on the back of the Bradley was latched, locked, and they had to basically my team leader at the time almost broke his foot trying to kick the escape door out. So we were able to get them out. We had to evacuate our driver through the hellhole and through the back, and then secured a building that was right there by the corner, and that was our medevac area. QRF showed up, and we helped secure the area and just slowly got things as quickly and as effectively taken care of as we could. Unfortunately, our driver of that second Bradley passed later that night. We had a few other guys sustain some injuries, but he was unfortunately killed in action that night.
Oh, geez, man. And I would assume you get back to the base and it's like, all right, go to sleep. We're doing it again tomorrow night.
Yeah. Honestly, we wanted to, because we still technically had a couple hours. So we wanted to roll back out. We weren't allowed. And we were actually told not to go out for about a week. So our section of our platoon wasn't allowed to do operations for about a week. Because of the fear of what they thought we might end up doing, which was probably justified. But that was probably the last big explosion that we had happen on that first deployment.
It sounds like there were several, one with 6 KIA, maybe from what I had read, just 2 weeks after another set of guys getting killed. It was not an easy deployment by any means. Ben, how about you? What was your first time downrange? What unit were you with? You mentioned you're a medic with an engineering unit.
Yeah, so the first one was different from any of the follow-ons. So I was in the 94th Engineer Battalion out of Fort Leonard Wood. It's my first duty station. And yeah, that was definitely much different than anything else I had done. We did the train up for it, and I was like, man, this is cool. I felt awesome. I could have been in Call of Duty. But then we got there, and I was in a construction engineer unit. So, they weren't combat engineers, anything like that. And And our mission was entirely different from anything my hopes and dreams. We were there to, build things, tear things down. And luckily I got tied in. I can't remember what other unit was there. We were up in the Mazar-e Sharif, and I got tied in with a aid station there. It was an aviation unit, and that's where I actually got to do like some hands-on stuff. I was getting they'd shut the clinic down, and we'd bring people in and like help the cool-looking guys out with different things and everything else. And so that part was really cool. The rest of the stuff I was kind of like, all right, what did I sign up for? This isn't, the Call of Duty stuff I saw and I was kind of feeling, but I got a lot of good hands-on experience. It helped me. I was a young NCO at the time, and it helped me really kind of build up those my skills as an NCO, but also as a medic at the time. And we got done, and I was like, all right, I learned some things, but I want to do some more. And then, fast forward a few years, I get to third group and go on my first trip with them and start rolling out. And I was like, okay, this is a little bit different,
This is what I signed up for.
Yeah, I felt really prepared, and I got to third group at a weird time. It was kind of where all those early OIF, OEF guys were kind of coming to the end of their careers, or maybe taking those higher positions. But my team was we had such a good spread of new guys, and then I won't call them old guys, I'll say the experienced guys, where like I thought I knew some stuff and I learned I knew nothing. And the experience really kind of carried over, especially on the first trip. It was a good trip to I got to a team that was kind of, I don't really even know how to describe the team, but it needed some good leadership and guidance and direction, I guess we could say. And with a leadership change out, brought in a couple other guys to the team. That first trip really like built us up and especially leading into the second trip. Like I think our warrant described the team we were in the crescendo when we went into our second trip. Like everyone was on point. Everyone, we knew our roles, we knew our jobs, we knew the other guys' jobs to cover down. And that was, anytime we rolled out with them, I was like, I'm good. I got this. I don't want to say like, I won't throw complacency around because it wasn't that at all. But it was definitely a much different experience between the conventional forces where I worked at, and then going here and rolling out. Like it felt much better. I had the confidence just from the people I had around me, and it made me just really enjoy the job even more. Every time rolling out the gate, it was fun.
So I want to revisit that in a second, but why did you decide to go SF? So clearly, like you were looking for something more exciting, but there are many routes you can go. Like, where did SF come from?
So I kept talking about it. I had a buddy who was an 18 Delta early on, and he kept telling me, hey man, you got to do this. You got to do this. And I said, oh yeah, I will. I'm definitely going to. Yeah, I will. And it was actually on that trip in Afghanistan. Someone had given a guy my name, and these two guys walk into the aid station wearing flip-flops, cut-off camo shorts, and tank tops. And they had these awesome beards. And they said, I'm looking for Sergeant Raymond. And I said, yeah, that's me. And he shook my hand. He said, my name's Brian. I said, well, I'm Sergeant Raymond. And he said, what's your first name, dude? And so they had missed their resupply never came in, and they needed medical supplies for an op. And I let them go shopping in the clinic. And 2 days later, 2 cases of Monster showed up at my door. And I was like, I can't believe there's Monster here. And that was kind of the thing. I was like, all right, they told me what they were doing and everything. And that was all the recruiting I needed. And then the Army tried to put me on orders to Korea. So instead, I found an SF recruiter. I dropped a packet real quick. 2 weeks later, I went to selection, and my orders got canceled. Dang. So that's how I got to where I'm at.
And then what about third group? Why did you get assigned there? Was it preference or just kind of luck?
No, I was hoping for 10th group. For some reason I was like, yeah, 10th group. I like Colorado and everything. And I said, yeah, 10th group would sound cool. And, an option to maybe end up in Germany or whatnot. And I got assigned MSA Arabic, and that put me at third group. So I had nothing to do with it, but I'm very glad it happened. Like I couldn't imagine being anywhere else. I really like it.
So you got Arabic as a language?
Yeah. Yep.
You must have smoked that language exam, man.
Yeah, it surprised me. I for the first 2 months, I thought I was going to fail, and then while we were in language school, I was like, I am in trouble. Like, I'm not going to graduate. And then all of a sudden, one day, words started coming out of my mouth, and I was like, that's Arabic. And
Wow. I thought
and
most third group guys got French.
no, there's a split. Most is French, but MSA Arabic will go to third group, and then the other dialects will go to fifth.
Okay, got it. Yeah, of all the places like for the ski bum in you to go, third group is an interesting one, right?
Yeah. It's I'm here, hours away from the mountains, but it's all right.
All right. Jeez. Ben, let me stay with you then. Can you take us through getting into that first unit? You mentioned this leadership change out that happens. Did you deploy with the less than stellar leadership team?
No, that was it was real quick. It was over the course of a couple months, and I wouldn't say it was less than stellar, but we got it was just kind of like everyone came back from where they were at. When I got there, people were out doing trainings and other things. So it was kind of, we were never training as a team. It was always partial. And once the team sergeant got in there and everything else, and the team was together for months, and then throughout the whole training cycle and then into the deployment, that's where everything really came together. It was where I think it was just so many people had swapped out. We were never really on the same rhythm. And as soon as we had everyone back together and we could really focus and like nail down training, that's where everything, smoothed out, and it was just a pretty well running machine.
And did you stay on the medic side, or did you say you went the engineer route?
So I did. I was an 18 Delta for a few years, and I asked if I could reclass, and I got laughed at. And it took about a year, but they eventually let me do it. So I came back to the course as a student, did the Charlie route, and now I have both MOSs, I guess.
Why the decision? I mean, I understand why they wouldn't want to let you go, because it's such a prized commodity to have an 18 Delta, given the skill set and training that goes into it. Why did you want to switch?
I really enjoyed the engineer side of stuff. We always seemed to be short on the Charlies, and I think that's what allowed them to like make the decision. Okay, you can do this. There was some deals in place. I had to maintain my credentials and everything as a medic, but I was always kind of drawn to that stuff. I linked up with our guy, Tim, one of my good buddies, and I was always working with him, whether it was building things or learning about demo and all that. And it really interested me. And I thought like, hey, I could do this too. Maybe they'll let me. And it was fun to make that swap and kind of get to see it from different angles. They joke on the team, they called me Chelta One. And I don't know. I like having both those skill sets available. When people ask me, I say, yeah, I'm a Charlie, but yeah, I still got the medical skill set, and I can do it when I have to.
Yeah. I bet the team leadership loves having an extra Delta kind of just hanging around in the team.
It's definitely it's paid off, especially if the medic's got to do something, we got a range or whatever. Like it helps that I can be like, hey, I'm covering down for the day. Even where I'm at now in the instructor world, like if we're short, I'm like, hey, I got you. I'll come out and I can play medic, no big deal. It helps when we're doing PT and everything because I can cover down on all that. So I'm glad I did it, and I don't know. Hopefully it'll just help when I go back to the team life.
So. Kenny, when you come back from that first deployment, first of all, how long were you deployed since you joined mid-rotation?
So they actually had an extension. So I was there for a year, and they were there for a year and a half, I think, if I remember correctly. So I showed up late to the game, and they were already, I think, like 6 months into their deployment, if I remember correctly.
It was 2006 into 7. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. What is
2007? Yeah. So yeah, 6 into 7. That's right.
Just, I'm kind of drawing a correlation here with S.O.S. and those 3 themes that you highlighted. I got to imagine losing people like you described, and like I've read about from 1.5 at the time, it has to be pretty demoralizing on top of being extended at that time, like you all were. What was morale like kind of as you went through that deployment?
Through our first deployment, I mean, prior to that event, morale was really high. I would say, I mean, a lot of people were kind of not excited to be there. That obviously people wanted to go home, but overall, people were like, our section had a pretty exciting deployment, which kept us engaged and kept us like wanting to keep doing it. I mean, because we're doing our job as infantrymen, even though it's mechanized, like we're doing our job. And so we weren't just sitting around cleaning weapons and hanging out. So it was engaging enough to keep us wanting more. After the incident, morale definitely shifted. And it was kind of, I think, more of a realization that at any moment, anything can happen. I think it was kind of like a reality check for all of us, that we are not all godlike. Like things can go bad fast, and we don't have complete control of the situation. But overall, I mean, we knew we were coming closer to having to go home. Our op tempo actually kind of switched more from patrolling to actually we switched from that strong force to more of a perimeter force. So we were basically just doing check operations. So we'd set up shop, sit there and wait. And if people wanted to come in, they'd have to come through us. And then if they wanted to leave, they had to come through us. And we would just sit there for the day, for the last couple of weeks that we were there, which was boring, but I mean, a necessity to the mission at hand. So we made games, had fun, kept our morale high. So it ended on a decent note.
Question for both of you, just in relation to that, the fact that you were kind of stood down for a week after a significant event, for lack of a better term. Do you feel like that maybe at the time and in hindsight was the right approach to have you guys not go back out for a week just to reflect on what was going on? Obviously, to stop any type of potential retribution, I think is what you were alluding to earlier. But I don't know, from a mental perspective, like, is that a good way to go about it after an event like that? This is to both of you, either one, man, because I'm sure you've both been through some catastrophic events.
I think we were probably, a majority of our section was probably not in the mindset to think that way during that time frame. Like obviously now looking back, it was definitely a wise decision. Just because of how heavy the situation was, and B, just being able to come back with a clearer mind, as opposed to being filled with rage, essentially.
And at the time, you just want to get outside the wire again, basically, and like.
Well, yeah, we wanted to turn around. Well, we wanted to find the people more than anything, and so I mean, we were ready to like just turn around and go right back out with one vehicle and just make it happen, but we weren't allowed to for right decisions. And then, yeah, the call to come down that we weren't allowed to further our patrols for a week made that week very daunting. And it just turned into just training for us, which is good. I mean, we were able to speed ourselves back up and get back onto the pace that we needed to when we did go back out.
How about you, Ben? I'm sure you've seen your share of losses, sadly.
I've been pretty fortunate, actually. Definitely, I've lost some friends and whatnot. But most of my experience have been, we've come home, we left together and came home together, and I was very fortunate in that aspect of things. I think though, I think I'd end up feeling the same way. I want to get back out after that, but probably would have needed to take that breather to get the brain right for sure. But like I said, I've been very fortunate. We rolled out together, came back together, and I can't complain about that at all.
So glad to hear that. Kenny, when you get back from that deployment, that's a year is a long time. I have to imagine the time from like signing up to being downrange, the way you described it, and actually outside the wire was pretty short. So you got a year of some good action. You come back. How are you feeling coming out of that, knowing that you probably had to go right back again the next year?
Honestly, I didn't really want to come back.
You didn't want to come back to the U.S.?
No, I didn't want to go back to Garrison. I like I said, as a kid, I wanted to be a ranger. Like I wanted to be that hard hitting. I wanted to go ranger or SF was my main goal. And kind of similar to Ben ish. I had a fortunate time while I was deployed to run into a couple of team guys in a gym and pick their brains about how to pursue that option. So in the midst of our patrols, I was in the gym training or taking my extra time training and trying to get myself ready. So when I get back, I could drop my packet. But I wasn't able to drop my packet during that first year coming back. But I used that as an opportunity to continue my training and just to get better. So for me, it was more so like I wanted to keep working. I wanted to become better at my job. And so for me, in my mind, it was to stay deployed because that's my job, outside of obviously going and doing ranges and things like that. But the practical use of patrols and what we were doing there versus going and shooting at Fast Freddy and things like that, like it you get better, you get more knowledge hands-on than you do from training in my thought process. So I was ready to just go right back.
Ben, what was your first experience outside the wire with Third Group like? Can you take us to that?
Yeah, it was very different. Everything, it was different but the same, I guess. The same things happened. We got the Warno. We understood like, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what we're going to do. We broke off into the planning cells, did the planning and all that stuff. But it was much more. I felt like I got treated like a grown up, which was a good and a bad thing. We did PCCs and PCIs like that. We didn't drop the ball on that stuff, but it was your responsibility to do it. And I think that was the biggest kicker for me. I guess maybe I got used to having, the squad leader, platoon sergeant, looking down and being like, hey, you got, did you pack a mag? You got this, you got this. And this was on me. Like we did the checks, hey, we got ammo, we got food, we got this. But if I didn't pack those items, I was held very accountable for it. And I didn't have those 2-3 people checking me. It was like, hey, you're responsible. You got your gear. Okay, good. They take a quick look and then we load up and leave. And that was the eye-opening thing for me. I was like, all right, this is how we do it. And the team's, relying on me to have this stuff. I got my supplies. I got this. And then after that, we'd rehearse and we do everything just like anyone else would and roll out. And I definitely felt more confident with the team life going out, and a little bit more nervous that I was going to let someone down because I might have forgotten something or do something wrong. I'll never forget the first time when I got put as a driver, and I was like, "Come on, we got infantry for this." And then Team Sergeant was like, "Oh no, we're going to handle this on this one." I was like, "All right, fine. I guess I'm a driver today," and but that was cool because that was a whole different aspect, way to look at things. And I was just rolling out, going from conventional to SF it was very different, but I enjoy it much more.
How about obviously what people hear about SF? One of the primary mission sets is fit and training these other forces. How did you take to that? Because I have to assume you're doing it quite a bit downrange.
I like it a lot. I've learned over the years when you teach me something, I don't always get it. Like the first time I learned how to pack a parachute, I was just pretending. The second time, it was like my turn to pack it. I'd look up at the riggers and be like, "Hey, you said this," and then I trick them into doing it for me. I don't tell them, but I think I still do that when I got to pack a chute. But when it came to learning, and then when I started teaching this stuff, I really started to grasp it. And that's where I really enjoyed it. To be completely honest, I was a terrible pistol shooter. And it took me a while to build those skills up to go from terrible to, I think some people might say good. I hope so anyway. But when we started bringing in, whether it was in training or actual like partner forces to teach, that's where I got to like, I was like, all right, I'm really like practicing what I'm supposed to be doing because I'm doing examples, I'm helping them out. And I learned like I was building my own personal skills better teaching them. And that's what I enjoy about it. And I've met a lot of great people working with other countries and different armies, and it's only helped me become a better soldier.
Yeah, for sure. I got to imagine you're an instructor now, right back home. So
Yeah,
like you just use it
sometimes teaching these kids and working with these kids is harder than overseas, but we make do.
Awesome. All right. Kenny, I think a question for you here is if you can remember an operation, a mission, or an experience outside the wire where you just had a feeling something was going to go wrong or had the chance to go wrong beforehand. You were going into a bad neighborhood, whatever it was, the way the team was organized at the time. Does anything come to mind for you?
I mean, I've had a couple instances where like my gut told me something, and it ended up being nothing. But we were pretty good at making sure that things that we were going to do were set in place and as best as we could. Especially like my first deployment was just a crapshoot. Like you just never knew what you were going to get. My second deployment was completely different. That was when we were more in a training role than anything else. Anytime that we actually rolled out, we had to roll out with security forces with us of some sort. It varied on which one would come with us. So it just, on that aspect, that's where I actually felt more uneasy than I did on my first deployment. And it was more so just because it wasn't always action packed day in and day out. It was more like we're out here talking to the locals, trying to gain intel, and we're just kind of sitting here waiting. Yeah. And so that was the only time where things just like kind of felt weird and off. Like, you do what you can, find good cover and good, know your exits, know what's going on ahead of time. That comes into your pre-planning for your mission. But for us, it was just doing the most that we could ahead of time to have the best results possible.
Yeah. Similar for you, Ben. Like what comes to mind for maybe an op that you just had, like your spidey senses were telling you something could go wrong?
There's this one time. So without getting into too much stuff about it, there was all it was a meeting, and we went and checked the place out. Met with the security forces there, and we're like, all right, whatever, this seems cool. We were helping another unit out, and like, yeah, whatever, this is straightforward, easy. And on this particular one, we had a dog, and I was always that guy. They make fun of me all the time. I was always that one who ended up with like a pack of dogs. Like I was just grabbing them, I'd bring them in. They yell at me. They'd be like, Ben, your damn dogs, get them out of here. And I had a dog and needed an assistant dog handler. And naturally, they nominated me. And we did sweeps the building, no big deal. We go back the next day, and everyone had changed. Like even when we rolled into the gate of this place, like the uniform colors had all changed. We didn't see familiar faces, nothing like that. And that was kind of like, we were like, huh. We're chatting, and we're like, this seems weird. So, naturally went on to, the old head on a swivel. We're looking around, sizing the place up, set up the perimeter. And we get there, and we meet a totally different group of guys, and they're all of a sudden telling new rules for us and everything else. And we're like, this doesn't seem right. And so we're like, all right, we'll make the decision. We're going to go sweep the building, just make sure we'll go forward with this. Maybe, weird things happen. And all of a sudden, doors that were open the day before for like storage and things like that, they were broken. They said, oh, you can't open this. It's broken. And as soon as we got in, dogs started getting hits. And we were like, I guess the spidey senses were taken over by the dog. The dog said, hey, something ain't right here. We said, yeah, no. We walked around a little bit, and we said, no, it's time to go. And we took off. I don't know. It could have been nothing there that day. We talked and joked about it. Like, we don't know what was there. But that was definitely one of the days where it was actually one of my first experiences where like something doesn't seem right. And we could have been wrong. Everything could have been fine. That door could have just broke overnight. Who knows? But yeah, that was definitely one of those spidey senses days where something wasn't right.
Yeah. Jeez. You mentioned like you weren't a great shot with a pistol at first. And I think just because you're just with the SF community, like you train people on this, and it sounds like you've overcome whatever that hurdle or challenge was. For people listening, I know a lot of guys listening go shoot. What is it that like you end up having to work with people on or yourself when it comes to shooting a pistol?
For me, there's a guy, and I grew up with friends, good group of guys, and we talk smack to each other all the time. There's this guy on the team, Joe, who no matter what, he could get under my skin. Like he just had that way about him. And he'd been in the regiment a while. He was experienced. He was really good. And he would just rag on me constantly. And the first days out on the range, like it was just him like making fun of me. And I thought I didn't like him at first, got to fight. He's a great guy. And one day, he probably doesn't even remember this. He like paused all the like making fun of me thing to like give me some pointers. And I think that helped me to like kind of like be like, all right, I can do this. And I just started picking it up. And it was just, you had to get those fundamentals down in the basics. And I allowed the frustration, I think, to take over for a little too long. And as soon as I started, took that step back and realized like, okay, this is what I need to do to shoot this as good as my rifle. It became a whole lot easier. But it was definitely old Joe. He gave me a hard time for a long time. I'm going to actually tell him to listen to this afterwards.
Yeah. Tell him we talked about him in a great way.
Yeah. He knew how to get to me really good. And, but yeah, he actually taught me quite a few things, and we got it dialed down. My shot group went from this down to this pretty good. So can't complain about that.
Kenny, this brings up a question I did want to ask you. With S.O.S. in particular, communities and aspect of it, what Ben just described is one of the things I tend to miss a lot, which is some of the trash talking. It's not from a hurtful place. It probably felt like it in that case with Joe, but over time, I think you just understand it's like coming from a place of love, and then he's going to pause and teach you how to be a better shooter. So that's one of the things I really miss. I'm curious how you experience that, Kenny.
Yeah, and I feel the same way. Like that, you have these tight knit groups, and you get so used to just like being family that you essentially just pick on each other, right? And tear each other down, build each other back up. It's out of love. It's out of fun. And like our organization is very much the same way. Like you get a bunch of veterans together that either have separated and haven't had that experience, and you get them together. It just naturally happens. It might be a little awkward at first. You got to go through the pleasantries and be like, oh, okay, like, where did you serve? Who just serve with? Like, you feel each other out to see. But by the end of the ride, man, it's really great to see everyone kind of come together and like start to have those jovial moments. And then as rides progress, it just gets better and better, really, is the best way to describe it. Ben has experienced it a few times, and that's one thing that I thoroughly enjoy and love about our community is the fact that we can still, in a loving way, whatever you want to call it, pick on each other, right? And make fun of each other, but still help each other out when needed, like at a drop of a hat. So that's one thing I'm really fortunate that we have as a community.
Ben, are you able to get like even to make friends with SEALs in the S.O.S. community?
I haven't met any yet. I've gotten to work with them before, and it's always fun. There's always the the banter back and forth and everything else. So I've worked with all sorts. I've gotten to work with all sorts of organizations from pretty much from every military force. And I don't really, I'll joke all day. We can talk about Marines eating crayons and all that good stuff. But I've had good experiences with all of them. I've been very fortunate, so it's been good. And I've actually seen more Green Beret movies lately than I have SEAL movies. So I don't know what's happening there. But Yeah, I've gotten to work with quite a few forces, and I've had really good interactions.
Yeah. Oh man, it's always fun hearing the services make poke fun at each other. And one that I had just heard recently, I couldn't believe I didn't know this, but when I talk to Marines, they often bring up the Marines eat crayons, and a couple of them said to me, "You know what Army stands for?" And have you heard this from the Marines?
They ain't ready to be a Marine yet.
Yeah, it's like,
But we know what Marine stands for, right?
what's that?
It's muscles are required, intelligence not expected.
Yes. All right. That's the first time I've heard this. That's a great one, man.
Yeah, I think a Marine actually told me that.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. Actually, they're probably pretty proud of that one.
Yeah, they probably are. We get the Marines that switch over, and those guys, man, they can do some pull-ups. I'll give them that.
One of the things I've been asking folks more recently on these, as you look at your time in, if you had to put your finger on one or two of these moments that were you witnessing somebody do something courageous, what comes to mind for you, Kenny? If I could go to you on that one.
With that instance, the IAD, we had our QRF. We couldn't get the driver out at all. The driver hatch was shut, and like trying to get into the hellhole. That's actually where the batteries for the Bradley sit too, and the trays were kicked out and exposed. So we just couldn't physically get in while we were trying to hold security until QRF showed up. We had a staff sergeant, I'll leave his name out, but as we were pulling security, he hopped in. He actually dropped his gear, hopped in, so he didn't have anything on, and he crawled in through the hellhole over the batteries while they were basically just shocking the crap out of him, and pulled our driver out, and pulled him out all the way through the Bradley, and then we were able to get him on a stretcher. But that was probably one of the most courageous things I witnessed.
And presumably, he knew that was going to happen. Going into
it was the only way that would have happened was for him to be able to do that.
Jeez. Ben, how about for you, man?
I've had a couple different things. Some of them have actually happened like here in the States, going on medical rotations and things like that, and I've seen some guys, we were partnered up. Where the heck were we? Gone on a few of these. We were somewhere and it was a car wreck. And we both jumped on the ambulance to go out to get on the scene. We were working in a small spot. And I had the experience with car wrecks. I knew what to do. Like, hey, we're going to make sure it's stable. Then we can take care of the patients and all that. And he went right down in there. He knew like there's a possibility of a fire happening and everything else. And he dove right in. He was grabbing the people out of the car. It was a husband and wife pulling them out. And that was it was pretty phenomenal. I remember like I was focused. I went back to firefighter mode. I knew like I had patience, but I was like, all right, how are we going to stabilize the car, get disable airbags, and then let's get them out. And he went right to it. And then Army wise, a lot of the courageous stuff has more or less been for like guys standing up for the team. They a lot of times, someone might have something happened to them, or they might have done something that was questionable or anything else. And seeing how the team took care of each other, and, they go to bat for no matter what, take care of the team came first. And that was always the cool stuff. And that's what I loved working, the teams, like everyone was there just to have each other's back. And that's what I enjoy.
That's awesome. I do remember. So my dad flew Hueys in Vietnam, and a story that he has told me before, they had to pull some conventional, like there was no 160th at the time, obviously. So they had to pull some pilots to fly some SOG guys, cross border into, neighboring country. And he was getting briefed with another SF team sergeant, and whoever the command was like, hey, you got to take these guys in. Team sergeant, here's what you got to do. You got to be out. You're going to be out there for several days. And I think another team had just been compromised there, like a week or two prior, and it was a terrible op. And this guy, my dad still remembers it. The dude took off his Green Beret, threw it on the table, and was like, I'm not doing that. There's no way I'm taking my guys in for that. And he just remembers that as being this thing of like the kind of the guts it takes to stand up to senior leadership in a combat moment like that is just stuck with him to this day. Pretty cool. So for you, Ben, since you're still in service, I know like it's easy to get jaded, I might say, when you're in like the garrison life can be tough. Obviously you're training, you're gone a lot, deployments. How do you feel about it being in, as you look at like, I don't know, somebody like Kenny or myself, Kenny, I don't know about you, but like you're trying to recreate some of that experience that you had. And I see it. And that's why I do this. Like, I love looking back at that time. But for you, like, do you realize the camaraderie that you have now while you're still in it? I guess is the question I'm wondering.
I think I do, and definitely when I left to do the instructor stuff for the few years, I find myself more and more missing team life. Obviously, I'm working with guys who same thing, left team life to come over here, and we all have our small sections that we work in or do whatever. And I definitely. I guess I took it for granted while I was there, being in the team room and everything. I didn't realize I'd miss it as much as I do. And I am looking forward to getting back to it. But yeah, it's definitely it's something especially now, I definitely realize that I have. And I think I'll probably be hunting for it when I do get out. It's good to have that group of people. And like the guys, like, we might not text every day. We might not even see each other for months at a time. But every time we get back together, even if one or two of us link up, it's back to the old times, having a good time. So I definitely miss it.
You mentioned the team room. Can you give people an idea of like what kind of shenanigans or things happen in a team room?
I don't know if I can do that. Then I think people will be getting mad at me. But hey, it's just a.
What is a team room? Maybe help people understand what that is, and then they can use their imagination.
Oh yeah, it's just it's the team. Wherever the ODA, you always have a team room. It's exactly what it sounds. It's a room. Some are nicer than others. The third group, we got some nice new buildings, so that's nice. But it's where you come in, you do work. You load out for the day for training and everything else. You got plenty of space to, we teach classes in there. We do a whole lot of inventories. The Army stuff doesn't go away. Still got to do inventories and all the fun stuff. And it's just it's a place where you can get together. And when you shut that door, what happens in there stays in there is what I was told on day one. I walked in on some stuff and they shut the door and they told me to sit on a bench and be quiet. And I was told, like, hey, what's said in here stays in here. And any team starting ahead after that had the same rule. So that's how it goes. What happens in there stays in there. And it's a place for you and the team to just do what you got to do.
Yeah. Kenny, can we talk just a bit about your transition? From what I've read and you share with me, it wasn't easy, and it's kind of what led to you setting up S.O.S to begin with. Can you give people an idea of what it was like for you?
Yeah. So I got out actually in 2010, and I did not start S.O.S until 2021. So, I'm sorry. Yeah. 2021. That's kind of where 2022 is when I officially launched. 2021 was when I came up with the idea. I always had the idea in the back of my head, because like you were saying, like trying to find that camaraderie, that feeling again. Because you feel not necessarily alone, but you don't have that group to rely on. So I went through transition as well as I could with the resources that I did have available, and just kind of floated through space and time and life until I really kind of figured it out. I jumped from job to job, moved around a bunch. And then I actually was struggling with I have a TBI from my deployments, and that was starting to kind of take hold of my cognition and just my normal functioning. I was holding a position at a construction company as a junior project manager, and I was starting to not be able to do that job very well. I wasn't catching numbers very easily and just wasn't functioning on the job well. And so I was speaking with my doctor, and she's recommended finding a hobby outside of like normal life. I was like, kind of like, Ben, well, I used to like riding bikes. Maybe I should jump back into that. And she's like, yeah, grab a bike, go ride the bike path. I was like, not that type of bike riding. So I actually pulled up some YouTube videos of downhill racing and things like that. Showed her, and she looked at it for a minute, looked at me, and she said, okay, this is actually very beneficial for you. This will be very good for your neuron, like rebuilding your neurons in your brain, that quick reaction, memorizing courses, like all in all, being out in the woods, all these things that we know are good for our brain, all packed into one thing. She's like, obviously hitting your head is not good. So try to mitigate that as much as possible. But everything else that encompasses this is amazing. So yes, like you should try to get back into it. And so I went home and told my wife, hey, my doctor says I need to start riding bikes again. And so I bought a bike and got back into the sport. And then I fell into racing downhill. That's basically next month, which was the summer of 2021, and followed the race series here in the Northwest. And just by the end of the season, I had like 180 degree shift from where I was, like my brain function, to where I was at the end. I was like happier, healthier, obviously, because I'm exercising, and just better brain function. I'm just a better overall human. And then that was kind of where I was like, okay, if this helped me this much in just one summer, like imagine what it could do for a prolonged period for the veteran community. And just also rebuilding that community piece that a lot of people are feeling like they're missing. Like this has everything that I think we should have access to. So that's kind of where I really found my transition, is coming up with the idea for S.O.S as a whole, and getting people like Ben to come out to events that are outside of our realm of things.
Outside your realm in terms of geography or what?
Geography and style of riding. Ben and I both are mountain bikers.
And style of clothing.
And style of clothing too. And then
we're coming back to that one. Sorry, go ahead, Kenny.
So we are both mountain bikers. He's obviously on the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast, but it's very similar. You're on suspension type platforms for a bike. You sometimes pedal up. I choose to take a shuttle if I can, because I'm lazy. And then you ride down the hill as fast as you can. That's like kind of the goal. And then that's what we typically do. Well, we both met in Idaho and did a gravel race. Like Ben said, he did the 1 day, I did the 4 day, and you basically just sit and pedal. So for instance, he did on the final day, he did the 55-mile race, and I did the 102-mile race. And that's like, you're just out pedaling on a gravel bike for hours.
The first 12 miles was just pedaling up a mountain.
No way.
With no suspension. Kenny brought us out new jerseys that were Lycra material. So, like skin tight and everything. We're used to wearing baggies and everything else, and got these skin tight clothes on and everything else. And we rolled with it.
Yeah. With no real training, like Ben trained a little bit. I did a little bit too. And we had another member, another Kenny out there as well. All of us are mountain bikers, and we all completed the race and had a good time, but it was definitely all outside of our realm.
Jeez. So Ben, are you not going to let the guys in the ODA see you in that spandex, like the tight fitting?
No. I even put it on my Instagram when I shared I had to share my weekend photos on the gram. And for the record though, I did wear baggy shorts because I like having the pockets. I got to have snacks. But I put the top on. I said, all right, I'm doing this. And I actually really enjoyed it. I told the wife last week, I was like, I think I'm going to buy a gravel bike. We're already making plans for next year, going back out and doing it again. And it's definitely, I do prefer the baggier clothes over the Lycra, but I'll do it again.
Oh, geez. All right. And Kenny, just so I get this straight with S.O.S, I mean, you're based in the Northwest, but it's kind of nationwide. People can join, basically.
Yeah. Like Ben, we have a group, our Southeast group. Majority of them are in the North Carolina area, specifically to him. But yeah, we have people all over the nation spread out. So if people are looking to join, we are more than happy to help try to facilitate that, either get connected with the group that we already have established or help start establishing a group in an area that people are needing that outlet.
And kind of all experience levels you're looking at here, people who just want to kind of be part of that community, have that challenge, purpose, get on a bike.
Yeah, we have everybody from like they've never ridden a bike, but never ridden a mountain bike, all the way up to like some of us are very, very experienced riders. So, and then like we don't push people outside of what they're comfortable with on rides. Like we try to tailor our rides to like something that is manageable for everybody. And then people are getting together and doing their own rides outside of what we have organized as well. Just like, hey, I'm going to go ride at this area. Anyone want to come with? And people tag along. So it's helping recreate that community piece, even outside of what we organize.
Great. And we'll have links to everything in the show notes description. But just so people can, if they're listening right now, Kenny, like, how can they find this?
Yeah, so we are on Instagram as Soldiers on Singletrack MTB. We also have a website. It actually is either soldiersonsingletrack.org or SOSMTB.org. Both will get you in the same spot. And that's primarily where we're at. We're working on trying to get further social media presence, but that's primarily where we are at right now.
Awesome. Guys, I really appreciate the time. Ben, I wish you nothing but safety and good luck, man. I know you're still in the big machine, even in the more fun part of it, but still, you're going to be out there risking it. So thanks for doing that and what you do, continue to do. And Kenny, thanks for setting this up, man. Sounds like an awesome initiative. And I hope people listening, if this is something that kind of scratches an itch, or if you're dealing with the TBI side of things or some of the cognitive issues, it sounds like it's a great outlet. So thanks for creating that.
Yeah, thank you for having us on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
No problem. I hope you enjoyed that combat story. This one was a little bit different. Obviously, we don't typically have on 3 people at once, and we really wanted to get the word out about Soldiers on Singletrack, not just as its own nonprofit, but as a way for people to find something that matters to them that keeps them going after service. And this is a real issue among the veteran community, myself included. If I wasn't doing this, I would be struggling greatly right now with the same lack of purpose, challenge, community, which I found in doing this podcast. And thank you to all of you for helping me. If you are a veteran looking for that community, or if you have a veteran in your life, and this really isn't just veterans, I would assume it's very true for folks in the law enforcement community when they put that life behind them, first responders, the same, who doesn't seem to be finding their way, helping them find something like this, the Soldiers on Singletrack, or some other community with purpose is incredibly important to keep them going. They're going to have times where they are down and they probably won't tell you about it. So it's just something to keep in mind that I wanted to put on people's radar. So thank you for listening to that. We've got one listener comment. I'm only doing one this time. This one hit me pretty hard. This was a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and I just say a huge thank you. We're still at 4.9 stars there. It means a ton. It keeps this thing going. And this is one of the reasons I do this podcast. So this is from Stu 36K. And it was on the Ryan Rogers interview. And he says, I was a squad leader in 36K 3rd Platoon. My contract ended just before the Marja deployment. Marja was this significant offensive in Afghanistan, 2010, that Ryan Rogers was a part of. It was a big part of my life because I also had just gotten out when that event happened and I missed it. And I read about it voraciously at the time with a lot of guilt that I wasn't there. So he says his contract ended just before the Marja deployment. The junior Marines I helped train wound up as team leaders and squad leaders alongside Ryan Rogers in this case. Listening to this episode made me realize that I have never reached out to my junior Marines to hear their story of this historic battle. Within an hour of hearing it, I had already reached out to brothers I hadn't talked to in years. I'm sure connecting veterans is a part of your mission. Mission accomplished here. I get goosebumps just reading this. Means so much that somebody took the time to do this. I always hope this happens in the background, and I do not expect anybody to tell me that they're doing it. And I am admittedly very bad about staying in touch with my former colleagues in uniform. And this is a great reminder to do that. And the fact that it inspired somebody to go and reach out is phenomenal. And I hope that some of that rekindled friendship just comes rushing back to them, and they get to spend time talking about what it was like. So thank you, Stu, for leaving that. For those who haven't heard the Ryan Rogers interview, it's a good one. It really touches on something that I cared a lot about. And I would just say thank you all for keeping us going. It gets tough at times, trying to make sure we get one of these out every week for everybody. And I just wanted to say thanks for all your support. Makes it all worth it. So thanks so much. Stay safe, y'all.